Hey, I'm Mike of Mike the Vegan. I have a YouTube channel and I went vegan in about 2011. It was a bit of a transition and I did it originally for completely selfish health reasons, but thankfully pretty quickly I was like, oh, I can care about animals now. And so that was when I became actually vegan in terms of veganism. Before that it was like a plant-based diet vegan kind of.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about why you did it for selfish reasons.
Okay, yeah. So I had a family history of Alzheimer. So my grandma lived with us when I was younger, and that was like really rough to see. Just like witnessing somebody's brain go is really intense, and like it was somewhat traumatizing, let's say that. And so when I was reading through the China study, which my partner had handed me on a road trip, they had that whole cardiovascular section which talked a bit about Alzheimer's. I mean, we didn't have much research then and we still need more. I'm excited for the new studies coming out. But I read that and I was like, look, if I can do anything to make my arteries healthy, I'm gonna do that right now. So I tried to go vegan overnight, pulled up to the next like random diner and had like some bland string beans and pasta without sauce. I think that was my first official vegan meal.
Okay. Do you have that ApoE4 gene or whatever it is?
I actually haven't checked for the gene. I probably should.
Okay. And it's my understanding you are looking into that research and you're waiting for Ornish to release his and all that.
Yeah, I mean, they had a 5-year study that Ornish did, and we're seeing some anecdotes coming out right now that are pretty strong. There was a woman who, had mild cognitive impairment, which appears to be gone, which was covered by CNN. And so I'm hoping that this summer or so it'll come out, but I don't have the full scoop on that, but it'd be pretty great to see that. And then I will just pop a video out as fast as possible. I have all the other research that exists just ready to go and some other cool stories like one that you covered. Video on the YouTube channel VeganLinked. This is Jeff going around interviewing a ton of vegan people. He just finds this person in a random vegan restaurant, finds out that they had some cognitive impairment improvements, and it turns out that this guy was just missing 5 years of his life in terms of his memory. Here he is.
The morning that I get up and couldn't remember where my cereal box was, we realized that we had a problem.
Was that pretty much all of the, was that?
Hush.
Are your dogs vegan?
They do eat fully well-formulated dog food, which a recent study did show improved markers of like heart function and stuff like that. And they didn't get their taurine and carnitine went up, but I think they see something outside.
Okay.
Could go close all the blinds if it's more of a problem. But.
Okay. So now, were there any other seeds that kind of got you in this direction?
Well, my partner had already been vegan for a couple of years, and she was trying to force me to go vegan and was like, oh, if you've had dairy in the last hour when I kiss you, it tastes like a...
So who's been causing us a little trouble here?
This is Carmi. We take care of her during the day, and she's a mini greyhound mix, and she's also clinically insane. But we love her anyway.
Is that true?
Yeah, Carmi. Oh, you love her on the camera. She's just right here looking over there. Look at you. She does kind of look like a model. She's got that greyhound body, so she loves the camera. And she.
What about the other one? Where's the other one?
Diego just ran away to see what they're doing.
Oh, camera shy.
Yeah, bud. Come here, buddy. Come here, buddy. Oh, bud. Good doggo. Oh, my finger, you're so heavy. This guy is 100% purebred Yorkie. No, he's not. He actually has 0% Yorkie, even though everyone thinks that he's got Yorkie. He's just like a Chihuahua poodle mutt, but he's super loving to everybody in his family, but he wants to murder everybody that's not in his family or other dogs or pretty much anybody that goes by our house. So that's Diego. He's a good bud.
Are they rescues?
Yeah, they're rescue dogs.
Cool.
That's why they're insane.
Thanks for sharing who was interrupting us.
Yeah.
Were there any other seeds?
And then another reason, which is ridiculous to say, but it's kind of funny, is that my partner, who's vegan for a couple of years already, she's the one that gave me the China study, anytime that we would kiss after I had dairy recently, she'd be like, oh, I can just like taste that mammalian lactation flavor like on me in my tongue or whatever. And so she's like, I'm not gonna kiss you if you have dairy. And then like, of course, that is gonna motivate me to not be eating dairy. And so we had it coming from a few different angles of like health, romantic at first, and then, a few months in realizing that I was no longer directly paying in to how, animals are being killed. I was able to separate myself from it and no longer feel guilty enough, and then able to actually see, that I was contributing. And then able to care about animals for the first time, which is funny, and you don't realize that you have this mental block about caring for animals because you're part of it. And then I like to say I took the meat goggles off, and I was finally able to be like, yeah, I care about animals now, and so I guess I'm an ethical vegan too. So that, as well as studying environmental sustainability, combined was just like all three angles. I was like, boom, I gotta do this. Like, there's no two questions.
Did you ever think prior to that, there's no way I could do that?
I remember being deathly afraid that if I didn't eat animal protein in any given week or whatever, that my muscles would just shrivel up, which is so funny because I was like 140 pounds at 6'1" back then, and now I'm like 180-ish and way stronger than I ever was, which is kind of funny. I wish I could just tell myself back then, like, bro, you could just eat this plant protein and be fine, because I don't know, I mean, it took me months, and I was afraid I needed to just like eat fish or I would like shrivel up and I'll like become unmanly. It was ridiculous, but I finally got over that looking through all the research, and that's where my channel came in, because basically me being super vegan hesitant, despite being sort of led in that direction, is what led me to heavily go into the research that existed, at least at the time, and being like, oh, well, all of the amino acids are in these plant foods, and I can easily get enough grams of protein per day, and look at this, vegan guy's bigger than me, and things like that. And I finally was able to, string these little arguments together, whether it was in terms of protein or getting B12, that I would kind of go on these spiels and people would be like, hey, why don't you just make a YouTube video out of that? And eventually I was like, okay, I'll make a YouTube video out of that. And then I got like 0 views for the first few videos, and I was like, I give up. Maybe I'll just keep making videos so I can just like collect all my science in one place and like watch it back in fast motion to like reference. Yeah. And then thankfully Happy Healthy Vegan shared one of my videos about meat and cancer, and I got like 100 views, and I was like, that's it. I'm reaching the big time. Like, here we go. I'll keep doing this.
Yeah. That's cool. And since then, you've acquired some credentials, right? You're not just an armchair researcher, right?
Yeah, and that's my big thing from the beginning, and why I went so heavily into the research, was I was like, I'm just a guy here. I have a somewhat environmental background. I'm not a health professional. I don't want to be giving health advice. But I was like, I can still share all this knowledge that I'm super excited about if I just directly quote the studies and show the studies right there. So it's like, I can kind of give a little bit of the story, and then I can hop in with a direct quote from a study in JAMA or whatever, and then I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just basically public health messaging, and that's what I realized. And then I was like, I should just get a master's in public health. And so I ended up doing that, and now I feel a little bit better. I've done more of like master's level statistics for health studies and things like that, which I had basically been accidentally studying public health and learning a lot of the things that I learned in my classes years prior, just making videos with, hopefully 20 plus studies in some of them. Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 studies, but just going really hard into the studies, learning just as much as I could. And I've always been really interested in science, like watching, the Animal Planet Discovery Channel from a kid. So like, science has always been a thing of mine. And so that just tied it all together with the vegan stuff and the vegan channel.
And, speaking of being a kid, was there ever a time when you were a child that you saw an animal get hurt or killed or anything like that?
Well, there was one time, the first time I think I felt really bad for an animal is I was in my backyard with a BB gun with my friend, and it might have even been like a plastic pellet gun or whatever. And I did mess around with it all the time, so I had a really good aim, but it was kind of far away. And so I'm like, my friend's like, hey, just shoot that bird real quick. And I was like, okay, I'll just shoot at it. And like, I shot it and I hit it, and it was like, squawk, oh, ow, that hurts. And I was like, I just felt so bad. I like put the gun down. In that sense, like I didn't have my moment where I like stared into the eye of a pig, but I definitely was getting little hints here and there. But I was the kid, when I was like 10 or 12, I had my vegetarian friend, and I was told that chicken was just like a vegetable with legs. So I would say that, and he would get annoyed. So I totally understand whenever someone comes at me and calls like a baby pig a bacon seed or something like that, which, most people, I think, know that pigs are extremely intelligent, so that's like a little bit worse. You can claim some ignorance with like birds and how different they are. But I know where they're coming, the mentality that they're coming from with that. I was 10 years old when I did it, and they're probably a lot older than that. So they are maybe a little bit emotionally stunted there. But again, it's that situation where you're directly paying and contributing to it. You can't turn on caring for the animal when you've just actively been paying for people to like slaughter and essentially torture those animals.
Yeah.
So.
And so later on, do you feel like this might have been some sort of seed, these experiences, especially like the gun part? You know, I had a similar experience. I think most boys end up with a little Daisy BB gun.
Little, pump and shoot.
Yeah. And they end up shooting an animal, you know, I don't know why, I did.
It's just a target around and you're like, oh, it's moving. This is what you're supposed to do for hunting. And like,
yeah. Do you think that ever played into, you know, your realizing that animals are a lot like us?
Yeah, I think it's all about the straw that massaged the camel's back, which might have been somebody handing me the China study and finally, you know, breaking the dam and having me go vegan. But, you know, I grew up in sort of a hippie-ish community around meditation. And so I actually didn't eat red meat growing up. We didn't eat beef and pig or cows and pigs because they were supposed to be more like spiritually evolved. And so it would be sort of a more evil, bad karma thing to do to eat those animals. And so I ate a lot of chicken. I've probably eaten a lot of chicken in my lifetime, which I feel horrible about. But there was that mixed with like my vegetarian friends being healthy and then seeing, you know, my partner was very healthy as well and just like, you know, had just like 10 pounds of long hair. It was like, clearly you're getting enough protein. You're literally wearing protein. Like people would grab her braid and be like, is this a horse mane? Like what? And so just little things like that, just sort of chipping away. And then me finally just realizing, yeah, I should just go ahead and do this.
What really brought the ethics in the most for you?
I think it really helps to just get in the YouTube vegan space as a health person and just constantly be reminded and get to know the people who really had cared about the animals for longer than I have or did, and were doing active activism and just exposing me to even more and more stuff and just learning about animal sentience, which I did pretty, you know, a couple years in. I think I was already doing animal sentience videos. Like I have an oyster video that's pretty old, like being like, well, maybe they're sentient, so I'm just not even gonna mess with that nerve ganglia angle there. But it was other people really that did it, because I was just, obviously with society as it is, you're basically brainwashed to not care about animals for your whole life. And so the more people I was around that actually did care about animals, all of a sudden it was like, okay, I can care about animals. You know, different activists, people commenting like, hey, you didn't really mention the animals in that whole video that you were talking about how it's good to not eat animals. You didn't even mention like an animal. I was like, crap, yeah. Like sometimes I got too caught up in the health message there. And sometimes I forget the environmental aspect too, and I'm so caught up in the health. So I try to like hammer it home at the end of every video now, because it was like, that's what I really think. I'm like, yeah, you can maybe be healthier with this disease based off this new study, but we can also help the environment, and you're not paying to kill animals by eating this way too. So that was huge. And then also just learning. All of a sudden I'm in this scientific space where I'm presenting new information, and therefore I'm trying to learn all the time. And so I'm learning more about animals and, you know, pigs passing the mirror test for self-awareness, and, you know, dogs are iffy on that. They can do the smell test. They can like have self-awareness through smell, and then I'm sure different breeds are different. I think there's some little pugs out there that probably don't do as well as collies. Anyway, that's our fault for inbreeding them to the point where they can't breathe. So just learning about fish sentience, learning just the science. It's funny, so I came at it from a science aspect, and then the science is what got me to care more about animals, and even just chickens, like baby chickens being like better at math than like humans that are newborn or a certain age. Well, I mean, humans are basically in their 4th trimester when they're born anyway, but we have just all of these animals that are super intelligent, and they can suffer, and they have a capacity for memory and suffering too. And the more you learn about that, and then we had that Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness with Stephen Hawking in it, saying, yeah, these animals are conscious, and just everything just going boom, 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 boom. Yeah, I should care about animals. And then also growing up in Iowa and coming back to Iowa a lot and witnessing all the factory farming here, because we have 7 times as many pigs as people. We have these, you know, 1,000, 5,000, 8,000 pig factory farms here, and you just constantly see the trucks. And so just being reminded of that, I'm like, we are just trucking these super sentient animals off to die all the time, and we see them just like on the road, and it's like, oh, that one's empty. Is that more sad than seeing them go? So yeah, reminded all the time, and then the science angle just like hammered it home for me for sure.
When did you start your channel exactly about?
Like 2015-ish, I think.
And was there a lot of other YouTubers doing this?
So YouTube at the time was a bit of a heyday for vegan stuff because people were just learning about veganism and they didn't even know how to freaking eat. So what I eat in a days were just popping off. And, you know, we had the fruitarian crowd on there being really loud. And we had a lot of sort of like pseudoscientific claims as well, which is why I was like, I gotta hop on this and get some more science in there. And there were some people that were really good about it. And, you know, a lot of people started, like Plant-Based News started at that time. Nutritionfacts.org, I think, might have been around for a little bit more than that. A couple of years before that, maybe 2013, I don't know the exact timeline, but there was just a lot of energy there. Like, I think if I started the same channel today, I probably would just get drowned out in like the YouTube noise. But I mean, there were people, they would just show, you know, like a cute girl, it was always a cute girl, but like a cute girl would just show what they ate on a vegan diet in a day and they get 100,000 views in like 2 days, you know, that was how it was. Like I recently mentioned, you know, the Google Trends for vegan restaurant searches aren't going down per se, but the people that, you know, wanted to learn how to go vegan and just how easy it is to be vegan now, I don't think we have just the same desire and need for just like constant vegan lifestyle content. A lot of it is good, and a lot of it does get a lot of views still, but that was like the beginning. That was like, this is new. What is this? I want to learn about it, whether that person's going to go vegan or not, just to know what it is. And the first time it came on YouTube really in a big way. So that was a different time. There's a little bit of potential for that, I feel like, on TikTok now, which is sucking away views from YouTube and is a whole nother animal. But yeah, that was the YouTube story.
What made you call it Mike the Vegan with the MIK?
Oh, okay, so this is frustrating, and definitely I have a little bit of regret around this because I grew up just like listening to a lot of music and listening to a lot of hip hop and like just microphone, or a mic is M-I-C, you know, on to mic or whatever, you know, it's ridiculous to say coming from me. So the first 3 letters of my real name, Michael, my full name, or, you know, sounds the same as Mike. I was like, I'm just gonna do M-I-C because there are already Mike's the Vegan, M-I-K spelling. And so I just was like, I'll just have a little microphone and it'll be kind of like I'm, you know, microphoning myself out in the vegan stuff, or I'm miking other vegans or the vegan message. And so that was my idea. But then like people read it and they're just like Mick, and everyone who's British, like it's just Mick, especially. And so even though I say it at the beginning of every video, like once you've read it and you've got it in your brain, like I just let people call me Mick at this point.
That's cool. I find it interesting that there's so many longtime influencers, you know, vegan influencers out there in particular. Yet that's not the case if you look at like other ways of eating, like the carnivore diet in particular. And I'm wondering, have you noticed that? And do you think that that's pretty telling as well?
Yeah, that is really interesting. So we have the low carb community has sort of always been there, but I feel like low carb personalities weren't as much of a thing in roughly like 2015. We had some around, but it wasn't like, oh, a really big deal. I mean, you've got people who have been more or less preaching this for a while, like Scientologist Dr. Eric Berg. If I say doctor, I mean chiropractor, who's got millions of views, and people love the low carb message from him. But what does he really eat in a day-to-day basis? Like, I don't think he's on a ketogenic diet. So then we had the keto thing hop off a bit, and then I just recently showed the chart in a video, and the keto diet's like way down in terms of Google searches and stuff, so that's interesting. And it is the case with the carnivore diets. I mean, I just did a no longer carnivore video, and there's a lot of people, I mean, literally the carnivore MD, which was, you know, Saladino, is no longer carnivore. And we have all these people that it turns out they kind of cheat on their carnivore diet, which is funny because people have like accused vegans of that, but it's like, no, they straight up are saying that they do that. And even a recent person that quit a carnivore diet was like, there's just crazy weird pressure to be super puritanically carnivore, which is funny because, you know, there probably is a mirror of that in the vegan diet community as well. But she was saying like, oh, you know, as soon as the influencer she met up with got off the camera, they go and put their spices on, which is exactly what my guess was when people were not getting as much scurvy as they theoretically would with the amount of vitamin C that they're eating. There's still scurvy cases, like there was James Blunt, the singer, and then cases of like pretty bad vitamin C deficiency, like another one of the people that quit. The vitamin C level was significantly below normal. It was clearly deficient. And he got coiled hairs, which is like, oh, that's not bad. You know, that's not like scurvy teeth falling out level. But in a recent video on collagen I just did, I realized digging deeper into it is literally like your tissues like can't hold blood as well from not having enough vitamin C to make enough collagen. So you start like bleeding out the hair nutrients and the hair doesn't grow right. That is what causes coiled hairs. But it's like, oh, I just got these little coiled hairs, no big deal. And then they went away after I quit carnivore. It was like, no, like what other tissue issues could you have potentially had a month down the line, a few more months down the line? So yeah, spices with vitamin C and cheating is probably how less carnivores don't have scurvy.
And you mentioned the keto, I guess, kind of crowd plummeting. And I noticed that as well when I kind of in my feed saw some videos, ex-keto people, and I look at the comments under those videos. It sounds like a lot of those might be going to the carnivore movement. I wonder if
that's true. Well, carnivore is considered a type of ketogenic diet. But if you look at the pure search volume, like it's not as big as keto was. And so, we'll see where it goes. And there's always been this sort of Atkins style way of like high meat eating, which was not getting people into ketosis as much because they weren't going like really hard and purposefully counting macros and like clocking their fat to 85% and forcing themselves into ketosis. But it's very clear from the carnivore forums just over and over again that people, they end up with heart palpitations and all of these messed up weird conditions of getting lightheaded and electrolyte imbalances. So they think it's this natural way of eating, like they're lions out there. But they have to go to the store and get electrolyte supplements in order to not like feel like they're going to pass out or get heart palpitations. Like, I'm sorry, but your caveman ancestors weren't doing that. So the whole appeal to nature fallacy there doesn't work. And then just the level of just, people having diarrhea for 50 days straight, posting about it, asking for help. And
like on carnivore cringe.
On a carnivore diet. Yeah, carnivore cringe. Yeah. The yo-yoing between constipation and diarrhea. It's just, it's really nasty and like smelling like meat and getting keto crotch, which is another one the carnivore diet people get where like you get such an imbalance that you get like nasty stuff going on down below and smells. The list goes on. The bad breath and just, it's, yeah.
I feel like it's like their last-ditch death-based elimination diet effort, away from going Weight Watchers, Atkins, paleo, keto, and now we have carnivore. Like, what's left after that?
Yeah, I don't know. You could go breatharian or whatever. Do you just eat like the straight-up tallow-only diet? Like, I don't know. They're gonna have like weird
butter.
Yeah, just butter only with like vitamins in it or something. I can't think of how further. Or just blood. They could be a blood drinking diet. That's probably the new one. Oh God, did I just come up with this? The Maasai diet, where you just drain cows for blood and drink milk, and that's the only thing you eat. Like, but then they're just gonna disclude how the Maasai had like advanced atherosclerosis at young ages and all die because they like fight themselves to death. Which I've already seen the Maasai use as an excuse for low carb diets by like Nina Teicholz and stuff like that. The big fat surprise.
You mentioned earlier something about the vegan restaurants, and I watched that video. I don't recall though if you mentioned that other restaurants were having problems too, right?
Well, it's obviously inflation has made it harder. People are eating out less, so a lot of restaurants have closed, vegan or not. But I did talk to Eric of Happy Cow, and we're going to go over it in more detail. But there was a particularly higher percentage of vegan restaurants that closed. Yet, as I mentioned in my video, that search for vegan restaurants maintained relative stability, like it didn't add up at all. And so he was talking about some great points, credit to him, about how just vegan restaurants are run a little bit differently. Oftentimes it's a passion project. It's not someone coming from a business background. They're literally doing this for ethical reasons. They're probably more likely to pay their workers more, which means they have a lower margin of error and profit margin. And as well as just not having random other products that they sell, or like, if you go to Starbucks or something, they've got a bunch of cups, or like McDonald's, they've got a bunch of weird paraphernalia. I don't know. They don't sell paraphernalia at McDonald's. Anyway.
Somebody might be.
Yeah, but we can say compared to McDonald's, a good comparison is how they're going to have their, $1 or $2 heavily subsidized meat dish that, people can still afford to go there. But no one's doing that for like the specialty vegan products. Mm-hmm. And so they're competing at another level, add inflation, add increases in rent on top of that, and that lack of like business background, it's not looking good. But I think they'll recover. I really hope they do.
One thing I've noticed is that some of the influencers who are not vegan, like these carnivore doctors, they're never showing science. People like you show science, and so many of the vegan influencers for a long time, they've been showing science. I guess people are just busy. They don't have time to really consider all of that. So how can somebody make sense of all of this with all the misinformation out there? Is there a way to get like more accurate information and, kind of fight through the misinformation or whatever?
Yeah, this is one of the hardest things because not everybody is going to have a master's in public health. Not everybody is going to be science literate, especially with like our education system currently, at least in the US. And so you have this issue where vegans are trying to convince you something that you probably don't want to do and you've been told your whole life is something that's not going to be great. You know, you're going to not get enough protein or whatever, which again is ridiculous. And then you have the eat more meat, this really high calorie density food that is associated with wealth and has, you know, all this fat and is often loaded with salty foods and stuff. And they've eaten their whole life and is part of their culture. And so it's easy to just say, oh, this guy lost 50 pounds on a carnivore diet. That's all the proof they need when, okay, we have a randomized control trial here that we're showing you that, you know, like the Broad study out of New Zealand where a whole food plant-based diet was the largest weight loss without restricting calories and adding exercise of any trial that length. It's a harder argument to make, and so we need a higher quality of evidence, which is frustrating. And frankly, a lot of people just don't care about science. They don't believe in science now because we've had all of this like science misinformation stuff and just like distrust in authority right now, which to a degree is understandable. I mean, we've got like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment and stuff where like there's been dark history to certain sciences. And so it would be somewhat rational to be like, I don't trust scientists because they did this bad thing. But you can't just distrust all science and then ignore the hierarchy of evidence, this pyramid in which anecdotes isn't even on scientific evidence. And then you've got like meta-analysis and controlled trials way up near the top. And so that's what we're trying to use as high up as we can get on that hierarchy of evidence. And, you know, some people care, some people don't care. And it is, you know, all about your motivation. Some people just want to lose weight as quickly as possible and not make any sacrifices in their lifestyle. In fact, if they could lose weight on the donut-only diet, or as we've seen, as McDonald's can achieve, if someone just eats a low-calorie amount at McDonald's, they can lose weight. You can go on a drug binge and lose weight. Like there's a million ways of doing that, but are your arteries getting healthier, etc.? These people aren't thinking about that. They just know a guy or saw a guy on TikTok or whatever who lost all this weight. And so
stories are powerful and anecdotes are great at, you know, convincing people even if they're just transient, right? And so, you know, I try to focus on long-time vegans because I feel like that's reflective of the totality of evidence, even, you know, that this is something you can do for the long time, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these transient results, you know, I guess people are just being short-sighted, and like you said, they want good news about their bad habits.
Exactly, classic good news about your bad habits.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've been vegan for 14 years now, and if I just compare myself now to before I was vegan, you know, I had like relatively bad acne. Again, I was like 40 pounds lighter, way weaker. Like the amount of sports and like weight that I can lift now and do is significantly more. I mean, I was still like a pretty good runner from being so skinny and like doing sports my whole life then. But now, you know, like my grip strength from rock climbing is way better than it ever was then. I can like bench more than I could. Not that I can like even focus on benching or bench a lot, but doing stuff like that, you know, hitting home runs in softball, which is something I could never do. Just on and on in terms of physical strength. Like I said, I wish I could just send a note to myself back in time and be like, show me your bicep, bro. Like, I don't have huge biceps. I'm not a bodybuilder, but I know my bicep's bigger than your bicep. So just stop worrying about it.
Who are some of your like favorite influencers right now? And I know that's probably a bad question to ask because you don't want to leave anybody out, right?
Yeah.
I know we both love some plant chompers, right?
Yeah. Plant Choppers is great. It was fun to talk to him. I still love a lot of the classics, like Dr. Greger always surprises me with the new stuff. His collagen videos were great and inspired my recent collagen video. Neil Bernard isn't quite as out there today, but I'll still see him and be like, yeah, Neil Bernard. He's like a good old classic hits, and like Ornish and all those doctors that I'm just really proud of. I mean, Ornish for getting a study going on Alzheimer's is awesome. And then there's a lot of women as well, like Angie Sadeghi, who I love, gastroenterologist. Like I mention her almost on like a bi-weekly basis to people whenever they're talking about like digestive upsets and stuff. I'm like, well, Angie Sadeghi, gastroenterologist, talks about ramping up fiber and like maybe you can only do like an extra tablespoon of beans or whatever to get your gut adjusted at a time. So there's a lot of people like that that are awesome.
Have you heard of Brian Johnson?
Brian Johnson. Yeah, I did a video on Brian Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Brian Johnson, he's cool. He definitely won me over. So he's obviously like I said billionaire, I think, in my video. I think he's in the hundreds of millions, or at least he was when he sold his company. And at first I was like, oh, rich people. Kind of this, like, everyone had that attitude initially, and it was just like, oh, a rich guy tries thing. And so he was trying to just anti-age as much as possible and spend money on it. Then I realized he was vegan, and I was like, he's cool. No, I'm joking. Then I realized he was vegan, and I was like, oh no, is he promoting like weird disordered vegan eating? And then I watched more of his videos, and I was like, I still think he could diversify his food. Like, on paper, yeah, that's a great meal that he has, but it's like there's still going to be gut benefits, microbiome benefits to more diversity of plant consumption. But the point is, he's getting all these nutrients in. He's even like, in my criticisms were like, oh, well, with that many supplements, maybe he's stressing his liver. Well, it's like, well, he's getting his liver markers tested regularly. Clearly he's not. And then he's doing all this like skin anti-aging stuff and doing metrics that way, and really just getting metrics, which is great. Yeah. And so he is an N of 1, but he's an N of 1 with like 1 million data points. So that at least helps. Yeah. And it was just cool to see that he had a team of people that came to the conclusion that he should switch to a vegan diet so that he can have the best health in general, lowest inflammation, best artery health, etc. There are a bunch of cool recipe people too. I mean, I still love Cheap Lazy Vegan, and she's been doing like cool trips to Asia and stuff, which I need to do. I have a vegan travel company as well, so I need to do that. We've done like Iceland and Yellowstone and Costa Rica so far, which is awesome, but I definitely need to get over to Asia. And then like Fit Green Mind. I'm just happy to see these people do well, especially on things like TikTok. And like Fit Green Mind does really well on TikTok, and other people like that are younger. It's nice to see new faces in there.
Is that another channel you have, like a separate channel?
No, occasionally I'll just do like a travel vlog, but they don't get as many views. Okay. So I'm like, whatever. So I have a travel company called Vigo Travel. Okay. Like Vigo places. that could be my slogan.
Is that a website?
Yeah, vigotravel.com. Yeah. And so my problem is kind of like a boutique travel in the sense that like every trip is custom, and I just started doubling my video output. And so, we might go back to Costa Rica because it was awesome and it has a big wait list and stuff. But I could be doing 5 trips a year. It's also just a dilemma of like, how many greenhouse gas emissions do I want to blast through airplane travel, bringing like 20 people around the world constantly? Yeah. So that's something I struggle with. But that's
any other channels?
We have our Tiny House channel, but we just like pretty much finished it and just stopped posting. So, okay. But there's good. We were one of the first videos to do a steel framing video because we did an ultralight build essentially, where we had an old RV trailer that only had 7,000 pound capacity, and so we tore down the whole RV, which was moldy, and then like welded the trailer out to be wider, and then built a really light metal structure on it, and then used like really light materials to put it at like, I think it's at like 5,500, which is insane because a lot of these are like 10,000. With wood structure and like heavy cabinetry, but we use like foam cabinets and all that stuff. So
what's that called? Mike the Tiny Home or something?
That's Tiny It Yourself, TIY. Yeah. I don't think we posted in like 4 years on there, but yeah.
It still might be cool to check out, right?
Yeah, and if I do another craft related thing, like let's say I get want to diversify what I'm doing, I might make a more like crafty construction projects channel, like eco projects or something, and just fire the old channel back up. And just...
What are some, like, getting back to science, some of the most intriguing scientific findings that you've come across that demonstrate a well-planned vegan diet is not just healthy and appropriate, but like protective even against chronic disease and mortality?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've just been thinking more and more about lately is just the telomeres lengthening thing. That's insane. I mean, the idea that we have these protective caps on our DNA that they just get shorter and let our DNA get damaged more over time. But then it's like, no, we have 2 studies now showing that like either a virtually all plant-based diet, which is the Ornish one, I think it had like some low-fat yogurt, or the vegan twin study out of Stanford, the telomere situation is better. The telomeres lengthened in the Ornish study because it was 5 years long. It was only 2 months long for the Stanford twin experiment. But we're talking about just this, one of our most important components in our body, DNA, arguably the most important one, being more protected. And that flies right with the 15% lower cancer we see in meta-analyses on vegan diets, and people who likely haven't been vegan their whole life, and so it'd be interesting to see people who have a more plant-based diet for longer, because cancer can take decades to develop in some cases. So that one, the DNA protection, but really for me, it's what I started this for as well, and that is just the artery health. The idea of just keeping our circulation system going, because every disease has a cardiovascular component. Everything from like age-related hair thinning can be just not getting enough nutrients to those hairs because you have like microvasculature that's clogged. the diabetic blindness, the diabetic neuropathy, where you're getting burning or tingling or numbness. That's also from this microvasculature. And the erectile dysfunction stuff, the female erectile dysfunction, which is kind of, an interesting term, but really that's what it is, which can lead to, sexual dysfunction in women or less pleasure and stuff like that. I have a whole video on that. Nobody talks about that, but pretty much you point to any part of your body, talk about a disease. How is your cardiovascular system doing and how is that affecting it? Because we've got, again, Alzheimer's, clogged brain arteries to an extent. We have other things going on there. And then we've got just pretty much anything, kidney disease as well, clogging the arteries in there, lung disease, and clogged arteries is not going to help. Any disease that it is, if you have clear arteries, you're going to be doing better off, unless you just got dosed with so much lead that it's better to just clog your arteries so the lead doesn't make it to your brain or something. That's the only situation I can think of where having more clogged arteries is better. That's perhaps the main point, and it's just the result of eating lower saturated fat and more antioxidants, lowering inflammation.
Like study-wise.
Study-wise, yeah. I mean,
you mentioned the broad. I call it broad. You said brood or something.
Apparently it's called broad, which made me annoyed because I'm like, why are New Zealand people pronouncing this differently? Why are you doing it's spelled broad? Anyway, of course we have the Ornish and the Esselstyn heart disease studies, which are amazing. I want the updated version where we get 200 people with serious new imaging techniques that can really show the variations in plaque and really show that they're shrinking beyond a reasonable doubt, which I know we've had some people be like, oh, we need better information there, which is understandable. I want the highest quality information too.
You mentioned Esselstyn, and that reminds me of a friend who's a lifelong vegan, a really good friend of mine. She mentioned how much she adores you and how early on when she came across your channel around 2015, when you first started, she was like, yeah, I think you did one of your first videos was on oil, right?
Yeah, the oil thing.
Yeah. She mentioned that, and that made her give up oil.
Oh, yeah.
She's so stoked about it. She's like, I don't ever want oil again. Still, to
I
this
never
day.
told people not to eat oil. Okay, everyone's like, you're orthorexic. Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious. Does that still kind of stand the same, or has that changed?
I still would say that if a vegan is getting heart disease, there's a very good chance that it is largely driven by processed oil consumption. But likely, if I were to redo that video, I would have really emphasized that it's saturated fat that is really driving them. If you're increasing your LDL through saturated fat, as we know coconut oil does, as we know palm oil does, that's going to be the main driver. We can see some artery dysfunction, short-term effects with other oils, like there was even a study on olive oil, but then there's other studies showing that olive oil helps with that. And then just the idea that if you are going to become obese on a vegan diet, it almost has to be through the consumption of oil. In some cases, people will be able to do it through high fructose corn syrup drinks. But I'd say in 90% of cases, obesity in a vegan diet pattern is gonna be from over-consuming oil. So even though olive oil for the average person could even have some artery benefits in certain amounts, if you're going higher, you're getting your calorie content higher, all of a sudden you're having potential effects of obesity, which can vary by person with genetics. And we could make an argument that an obese vegan could still be healthier than an obese person who's eating a meat-based or other standard diet. There's a lot of nuances, which is why I had fun with it later, and I made my video of when people should eat oil, which you can look up, and then I ranked the oils by health, and true extra virgin olive oil was up there. Some of it's fraud, although apparently the blaming ones for being fraud was potentially funded by some of the industry players as well. So I need to do an update on that, which is interesting. So it's just olive oil wars. But then flaxseed oil that's raw, uncooked, is probably really good for you. It might help with blood flow and things like that. And it's a source of omegas.
Yeah, because there's a lot of hype around oil right now. People, influencers are like, oil, yeah, it's good. And even Dr. Kim Williams recently said it. I had an interview with Jesus, and he drinks it all the time. and so then Brian Johnson, he sells his snake oil.
He's obsessed with his olive oil. Yeah. But then he's all really careful about the source that he's getting it from, which goes to show you that if you have a bad olive oil source or whatever, and then cooking with it can be sketchy, which I think most people are just doing anyway. They're probably cooking with it, letting it get too hot, and then turn into some other things which are not good. But yeah, I think raw olive oil in an amount of calories that's not too high, especially if it satiates you and keeps you on a vegan diet and stuff, you're gonna be way better off. And that's first of all, I was expecting that video to get 10,000 views or whatever. And now it's become like one of the defining aspects of like my whole channel existence. It's not my most viewed, it's not even my top 2 most viewed videos, but it's still one that people are like, yeah, that's what I associate you with. Like, is it okay if I eat oil around you kind of thing? And I'm like, I've done so many follow-ups to it, but they never get as many views. And there's probably less of an argument for the omega-6 to omega-3 inflammation scare. That could have been a representation of animal fatty acids versus plant-based fatty acids as well. So the information on that is going down. And now I'm like constantly arguing in favor of canola oil over animal fat because people are like, canola oil is the devil, seed oil is the devil. It all comes in this like, that low-carb keto camp has their sort of talking points, and I'm sure vegans do as well, but it's like seed oils are the devil, it's this weird industrial thing, like LDL doesn't really matter, and actually whole animal fats are what we really need. But we have massive studies, like 1 of 400,000 people, showing that I think it was per tablespoon of butter is plus 7% increased risk of cardiovascular death. But then you have like the canola oil trending for lower mortality and actually statistically significantly lower for total mortality, which is wild, but that's compared to a standard American diet. So like, we don't know. We don't have large populations of vegans that consume oil versus large populations of them that don't. And it's possible that, certain oils would help with omega-3. Like if you have no other omega-3 source and then you consume canola oil, your health might improve, which is funny. But if you are eating a normal junky vegan diet and you're pouring canola oil or you're eating all these fried foods, that is your main pathway to obesity and potential metabolic syndrome and other disorders, or like what's going to be driving heart disease as well, is all those things working together. So it's complicated. There's no right answer. And it really is very similar to sugar, which made one of my main points in that video is like, we take this refined caloric source and we are happy to just drizzle it on stuff. Yeah, there are other sugars that might have some antioxidants in them too, like olive oil does, but we're not happy just drizzling. Like people would be like, you're insane just drizzling stuff. And maybe some people do that with coconut sugar and stuff, but they would still just get some weird eyes, weird stares of being like, that's not healthy. And they're saying, no, this is really healthy for my arteries. Like that, you'd be considered insane. And then just, the idea is like sugar is also something that drives heart disease through oxidative stress and inflammation, but it's something that in certain amounts, you're probably gonna be okay. It might not really show up in terms of disease, but it's again, one of the main pathways to obesity with the processed food consumption, so.
And Dr. Nagra, are you familiar
Yeah, I briefly mentioned him a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, he had a study that recently he went over where if you have, I think, ApoE4, it might be protective a little bit, but if you don't, there doesn't seem to be much benefit.
Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing with a lot of these genes that we just don't think about. We think of, oh, you have that disease gene, you are actually inferior. Well, no, the person with the worst heart disease gene that might affect a clotting factor somewhere would have been the person that survived the lion attack in the Serengeti or whatever, in our ancestors, because they clotted up fast enough, they didn't bleed out, and they didn't die. And so it's like, why do we have these different genes? There's a reason. Some of them are just really not good to have nowadays when we're just loading up with things like fat, and clotting is probably our main cause of death in our bloodstream. In fact, it is. It's our, between heart disease and stroke, it's way up there.
Changing gears to this now, anti-nutrients. What's your elevator pitch response to soul-searching, peddling fear regarding like anti-nutrients such as oxalates and?
I think the two main anti-nutrients that you hear about the most nowadays are lectins and oxalates, or oxalates, as people want me to say.
Are phytates too, or no?
Phytates are one too, but they get less attention. They're from beans. So we have especially lectins and phytates in beans. Yet we have a study that looked all over the world and found that legumes, which contain these anti-nutrients, are the #1 dietary predictor of elderly survival compared to any food. So the old people who are living the longest are eating the most beans across the world, regardless of the cultures they looked at. It just doesn't add up for that reason. We also have some mechanistic studies showing that phytates are anti-cancer. Lectins are generally cooked out for cooking properly with pressure cookers. And then oxalates are a bit more complicated. We have what I've been saying, because these carnivore people are insanely afraid of oxalates. That's why they think plants are going to kill them, which is just, it's its own pathology there, having that belief. But they don't know that most of our oxalates are created by our liver as byproducts to things, and even some like glycine, a protein that they get a lot of, creates a oxalate as a byproduct. So 60 to 80% of the oxalates in our system are from our liver. And so you can detoxify as much as you want and ironically eat 2 pounds of meat or more and get a ton of glycine that's going to be converted into it. Someone who has a normal kidney function level, they're going to be completely fine. And these vegetables that people are afraid of oxalates in are over and over again associated with lower mortality. Like, what else do you want to say? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it reminds me of like our ancestors though. And in that video you have that you released recently, I've been referencing that so much because people are constantly like, well, my ancestors though.
Yeah.
and that's just a great video. I'm so glad you have such a vast array of content, and it's such a great tool to kind of throw at people who say such silly things.
Yeah, and that's the fun of it, I think. Like, if I just make a video on oxalates, people are going to be like, that's okay. And like, I think I did, and not that many people watched. But if I'm responding to somebody making insane claims about that and like having fun with the back and forth and the science that way, then people actually watch. Otherwise, they don't care. That's a big lesson I learned. I
can only imagine with like as many as subscribers and views, you must get a lot of like crazy comments. And I do too. It's almost like a full-time job trying to keep up with. A long time ago, I started creating like canned responses in my Google Keep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I even like started a forum on my website where I might even start archiving these, so I could just say, just go there. I'm wondering like if it gets overwhelming for you, or if you just kind of ignore it, and if you have any like tips there on how to handle that. Or
yeah, I think at this point I'm really lucky in that I've been sharing the scientific responses to 90% of the attacks that occur. So people have been watching those for years, so they will respond in my comment section for me a lot of the time, which is awesome. I mean, yeah, people would rather have me respond directly, but I'll go down and, someone to an oxalate point might say, well, most of the oxalates are made endogenously, and then link the study. And that's the difference between like the carnivore community parroting stuff, and hopefully the vegan community of my viewers at least parroting stuff. If they're going to be doing that, I really want people to think for themselves. If they are, they're going to be citing the study as well, usually, which is great. And that is the problem, again, just to go right back to the carnivore community, is that even sometimes they are using science, and it's just like really low quality science. Like, they had essentially a bundle of anecdotes that they published, which they view, they put it up there as
that's the only one I know of.
Yeah, as if it was a randomized control trial with like a meta-analysis.
It's like healthy user bias, right?
Yeah, it's essentially pure. It's like an exercise in user bias and reporting bias and all of that stuff. But really, their main argument is, this is so new, despite this being the diet that we're meant to eat for our entire history. This is so new that we don't have science yet. So, they just cast the doubt. They say, oh, well, it hasn't been proven wrong yet. So, we might as well do it. Look at all these little anecdotes. They're great. It's going to be great. Or we're going to have the science in the future, which is wild. And then you realize that a lot of it is just a money-making scheme, or even an act, like Dr. Sean Baker going on an interview, like a debate, and just basically saying that it's all like social media fun. It's all entertainment. Yeah. And it's like, you're a doctor giving medical advice. I think it's a little bit more than entertainment. Yeah. Which is crazy, like the way that people respond even to him. Like he definitely has like a cult following, in the sense that like, I responded to that lean mass hyper-responder study, complicated stuff. And just in the beginning of the study, I just used him as a quick example. My intro was like, oh, people are shouting it from the rooftops. Here's Sean Baker. And I just clipped him just to show like, people are talking about this. And because I didn't include his whole video and all of his nuances, people freaked out. He did his response video. You have thousands of people being like, Mike the Vegan needs to be taken off. He needs to learn through trauma, and just coming in and just calling me a liar over and over again. And that was wild. And I was like, man, this is dangerous, especially because, there's people with mental illness out there too. And if you're like really trying, and like I try to keep a lighthearted, joking aspect about it, but like when you're like getting angry at somebody, or putting on an act in which you're pretending to get angry at somebody that you don't even care about, which apparently is what's happening, you're firing up your base. And it's like, that's why I'm just going to be kind of incognito over here and not, be like telling everybody, to come say hi and stuff.
Yeah. When you're out and about, as famous as you are, as in my eyes at least, do you run into strangers that know who you are? And
Yeah,
has that ever gone sour?
For sure. Yeah. Pretty much everybody's been nice. The closest I've gotten to that is somebody being like, hey, I know who you are, I've seen your videos, and I don't agree with you. And that's happened a couple times, but generally the people that know me are obviously like this niche vegan crowd. It's a vegan restaurant, it's a health food store. Sometimes it's in the street or whatever. But people are always really supportive. There's probably people that saw me and hate me and just didn't say anything. Like, that's a good chance, yeah. And then I see people and don't say anything. Like, if I see a famous person, it's funny to say, I'm not going to be like, hey, what's up? Come talk to me. Unless they're like seem really open and like trying to talk to people. So who knows?
Have you had any luck with family and friends, dealing with them during the holidays and stuff like that?
I have, again, because I grew up in kind of a hippie community with a lot of vegetarians around, and my family didn't eat red meat. Like, we'll do vegan or almost fully vegan Thanksgiving, where like maybe one family member will like throw cheese on something because they like absolutely feel like they need it, or it's like their holiday, they want to do what they want. That has been very easy for me compared to other people. So like people with like hunters in their family or people who are in the industry themselves, that's where it gets really interesting. But in general, it was the same concerns I had. It was like, are you going to get enough protein doing this? And now I think they look at, like, they haven't asked that in a while, but it was funny. So like my mom can be a little bit dramatic sometimes. She's from Jersey, and like I went vegan, and she was aware of that, and my weight stayed exactly the same, and my body composition didn't change or anything like that. And she just looked at my forearm and she went, oh my God, your bones are gonna snap, your wrists are so thin. Like, it was completely psychological, it was wild. And we see this over and over again with like people's preconceived notions about veganism or whatever. And my favorite one is the sausage king, the self-proclaimed sausage king, who does the taste test of the vegan and sausage and the like cow or pig-based sausage. And he says that the vegan one is the real one and the other one is fake. And the moment he's told that he was wrong, he goes, oh, well, that vegan one did taste like cardboard, actually. And it was like, that was the fastest, that needs to be studied, psychologically studied, that moment right there. Because he completely rewrote his experience.
Yeah, they need to be analyzing his brain.
Yeah, they need to, yeah. There might be a couple of holes in there. There might be some of those brain worms.
I noticed you have a lot of instruments in the background of one of your videos.
Yeah.
Do you play?
I've been in bands. I play a lot of instruments and none of them really well. But yeah, like I've played keyboard in a band, I've drummed in a band, I was a lead singer in a rock band in Chicago for a little bit, and so, I've had fun just like jamming out and playing with people over the years, but I need to play more lately.
Yeah, and you mentioned rock climbing, and I don't know if you said hockey, and you're into a lot of stuff, softball. So you're a pretty active guy, not just a vegan.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, my daily rotation, like there's people that don't even know I'm vegan that I play with, which is funny. Well, now I feel like they joke about it a little bit in softball. Yeah. My daily kind of weekly rotation is I'll rock climb if all goes well on like a Saturday, and then sometimes I'll play ultimate frisbee, which is like frisbee football on Sunday, and then Monday I'll play pickup softball if the weather's good. Wednesday I play like pickup floor hockey, which is casual and fun. And then I'm probably going to the gym, most days of the week to some extent. So I'm trying to get exercise every day.
Have you noticed a pattern with those who claim to have failed at this? Could it be that they were maybe treating it as a diet and therefore didn't have the ethical underpinning needed to endure the learning curve, for their particular situation?
Yeah. Well, yeah, ex-vegans are always a really interesting case, and I've essentially studied every major case in detail. And in my book, Level 5 Vegan, A Guide for Long-Term Vegans, I cover quite a few, and I even made like a chart of the traits that they had, the ones that quit had, and a lot of them stick out. There's some simple ones that aren't as obvious at first, like getting a new non-vegan partner is a very easy way for people to quit. I mean, that's how I ended up going vegan, so I understand like the dietary shifts that happen that way. And then there's also, I say, like sort of a resistance to work with medical doctors and get blood testing. Those kind of go hand in hand because they're going to test you. And so just sort of like having feeling level things, because there's like, there's maybe a friend they know that quit, and then they go, oh, maybe something's wrong with me, or this diet has a problem. What are the problems? Oh, well, it might be low omega-3s or something like that. So what are the symptoms? Oh my God, brain fog, or like not being super sharp or whatever. And then they start thinking, oh my God, I got brain fog. And then they diagnose themselves. Multiple people have just like diagnosed themselves with omega-3 deficiency without ever getting tested or anything like that, which is wild and just like also very unlikely based off what we know in the research. And so that is wild. I think I've seen like maybe 4 or 5 people go just because they felt that they were low in omegas, and then they end up eating fish. And I feel like there's just this, like, a weight is lifted where they're no longer having to be perfect, and they can just not worry about anything, and then they're just and then they feel relaxed. And
like I was describing it in that way. Like they have this accumulated social pressure that builds up, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I can eat fish now.
Yeah,
and it's just gone.
I call it the ex-vegan exhale. But a lot of them end up just like having problems the next couple months. Like Vegetable Police, this guy, one of the original vegan YouTubers, he's just like flip-flopping from diet to diet, and it seems like he just changes his diet, and all of a sudden
that's a show.
Yeah, his gut is fine for 2 weeks, and then his gut problems come back, and it's like maybe there's something more than diet going on there. Maybe it's a psychosomatic connection. Not to just say he's crazy, but
that's got to be just a show.
Yeah, he's also just being entertaining about it too.
I find it so odd since Tony Robbins got mercury poisoning from eating fish.
RFK Jr. also claims to have got mercury poisoning from fish, as well as that pork brain tapeworm.
Oh, he did get that.
Yeah, so he blames some of his like mental incapacity in the past to having this like brain. Well, what it is the larva of the pork tapeworm gets in your bloodstream and like goes through your blood-brain barrier, I believe, and then it creates a little lesion, which I mean could have some effect, but your brain kind of just encapsulates it as well. So.
As far as like the raw vegan, I've noticed a lot of people who yo-yo diet, when they're trying to do this, they're not really doing it for ethical reasons, like I said, but also they're yo-yo dieting, and a lot of them seem to try to go raw.
Yeah, I think the raw diet, well, I know some people that have been doing it for decades, and they appear to be healthy, and they're focused on meeting their nutritional needs. It's very appealing to the person that, kind of the same person that would go on the carnivore diet, where they just get to remove so much of everything.
An elimination diet.
And in a way it's an elimination diet, even more so, but just their fears around cooking, like I just don't see why steamed broccoli would be dangerous, and in fact you're freeing up certain nutrients when you're cooking them as well.
Carrots and tomatoes.
Yeah, tomatoes and lycopene. Lycopene is incredible for prostate cancer prevention, for UV protection, all these things. And so I don't know why. I understand in certain cases you can end up with acrylamide, but you can easily dodge that.
It's kind of like this spiritual thing, like it's living.
Yeah, there's everything's
enzymes,
alive. Yeah.
And there may be something too, like water-soluble nutrients being retained when you don't cook them, right?
But what we see is a calorie deficit, like potentially dangerous calorie deficit. Like the amount of vegans with a BMI of like under 27.5 or whatever it is on a raw diet is like way higher. Yeah. And so we see more people that tend to lean toward like anorexia, totally anecdotally. Like somebody can whip out something and prove me wrong on this. But in my experience, every time I'm at a vegan festival and I'm like, they need to be admitted for eating disorders, they're on a raw diet. And every single time I've seen that several times now, which, maybe that's just totally random that I happen to see that. But it also is the case that calorie consumption is a lot more difficult. Holding on to calories, like I can eat a 700 calorie smoothie and feel like I need to eat again in like 2 hours, but I can eat like 400 calories of oatmeal and feel fine in two hours or whatever. Yeah. So there's something interesting going on with that, whether it's a fructose absorption limit, which I know has made some people mad because it's, the data isn't really fully there, but the idea that you're overconsuming fructose, your body only absorbs so much of it at a time, and you end up just pooping out all these calories. And for me, it's the only explanation why you might have somebody eating 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day in fruit and gaining 0 weight. And it's like calories in, calories out is still a thing. So, thermodynamically, that energy has to be going somewhere. It might be a little bit more burnt off as heat, just metabolically, but you're probably also expelling it. Like, I don't know. And I've heard cases of people with like chronic diarrhea also eating a fruitarian diet. And so that would. So if you don't absorb fructose, it can create a bloom in your gut bacteria, which then leads to like you to evacuate. So
now some of the ones that I've met, they weren't even eating a lot of fruit. They're just mostly eating sprouts.
Oh yeah, or like the gourmet raws, I call it, like nut based.
Yeah, and they might be doing like fermentation, and they might be doing dehydration. So they're doing a variety of that kind, and they're getting all the categories. Just limited fruit is what I understand. But
yeah, there's different types of raw.
But you're right, they do tend to be low BMI, like super low.
Yeah, and I have friends who literally, they were raw, they were into the whole thing, and they got too low BMI. Like, that's their story, and then they just went on to, like, starch-based. Like, I have, like, Happy Healthy Vegan jokes about being at, like, a raw festival, and having to go and get rice because they were like starving and like they were just, yeah, their BMI was really low looking back, and they were like, man, that was probably the least healthy they've ever been, like, or in recent years.
I know you're busy, and this was awesome, and I'm pretty starstruck, so I was kind of a little fumbly on some of my.
No.
I'm so glad I pulled through.
Yeah.
I was hoping we could have done some other things, but I know you got to get, so I'm going to call it a wrap. But I'm curious, do you have a quote to end this with that might reflect this, or anything that we didn't cover that you would like to get out there?
I think there's definitely a lot of people out there that are just afraid to get on social media and make vegan content or like share being vegan on social media. But I think the quote of like, do one thing every day that scares you can kind of apply to that, of like, make that one post per day or whatever. And, you know, it will be hard sometimes, but the reward seems to be roughly like 9 to 1, 10 to 1 or whatever. I mean, unless things really go wrong and if they do, I'm sorry. But it's, you know, I encourage people to do it and learn more that way, and just put yourself out there and just have fun with it and connect with people. That's definitely mine.
I love that. I was kind of having that conversation today with somebody who has a couple of children they've raised vegan from birth, and she's always been real protective, scared to get them out there, and I can understand that, but I'm just excited to see more people talking about their experience and sharing, and I think that's just going to be really helpful to the movement, and just educating people that, hey, everybody can do this, and a lot of people are. What's next, man? Anything new?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of thinking about getting going on another more like thick book, real book. I mean, not that my ebook guide is not a real book, the Level 5 Vegan one, but you know, I've got my master's in public health now. I should just kind of start working into doing a real book, and so I might work on figuring out what my actual angle on that is and start. But right now I'm just chugging, trying to keep these 2 videos a week out. Really want to expand my short form content, my TikTok, my YouTube shorts, all of that stuff, and get more vegan trips going, because I get people messaging me all the time like, when's the next one? When's the next one? So yeah, we just Vego travel, Vego there with me in the future, which would be cool. Yeah, so I want to expand that. So thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And thanks for letting me get you in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, explodes into a V.